Welcome back to Normal Island. Apologies that we didn't go live yesterday. There was a last minute issue, but instead of cancelling, we decided to push it today. I'm Curtis Daly and I'm joined by the wonderful Samuel Kay. Samuel, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Really well. We've had a couple of technical hiccups at the beginning of the show, which is pretty much a weekly thing now, but we're rolling, we're rolling. We've got a really big show and I'm really glad that you're my guest tonight. Now,
Ah,
coming up on tonight's show, the co-founder of Sutton Council Palestine was smeared as a racist by Tory councillor. Right-wing priest Calvin Robinson does Nazi salute. Trump blames American Airlines plane crash on DEI. And Trump has created concentration camps for migrants. Now, before we start, make sure you like the stream. Please keep the comments going, because we're going to get to about halfway through the show. We're also pushing toward 20,000 subscribers. So it'd be a really nice milestone if we get there. We're close to 18. So if none of you are subscribed, make sure you hit that button and, of course, tell everyone about us. Now, on to our first story. The co-founder of Sutton Friends of Palestine, Tommy Oliver, has been accused of anti-Semitism by Tory councillor Tom Drummond. On January the 27th, Sutton councillors endorsed a petition demanding the withdrawal of investments from companies involved in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, or accused of contributing to human rights abuses in Gaza. During the meeting, The Times published an article featuring comments from Drummond, who condemned the petition as, frankly, at its core, anti-Semitic, and called its timing an absolute disgrace. His remarks were made despite the fact that the meeting date's Holocaust Memorial Day had been scheduled months in advance by the council, not the petitioners. The significance of the date was explicitly acknowledged in the petitioner's speech, which also expressed solidarity with Holocaust remembrance. During the meeting, several councillors praised the 5-minute speech delivered by Tommy Oliver, the teenage co-founder of Sutton Friends of Palestine, in support of the petition. However, Drummond had already given statement to The Times, which published their article while the discussion was still ongoing. The article singled out Tommy Oliver by name, linking him to Drummond's accusations of anti-Semitism. This is Tommy giving his speech at the council meeting.
I'm Tommy, co-founder of Sutton Friends of Palestine. We're a grassroots community set up 11 months ago to oppose the dehumanization of Palestinians. As humanitarians, we condemn all attacks on civilians by both Israel and Hamas, as well as decades of Israeli colonialism going back to the 1948 Nakba, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Our petition reflects the deep concerns of many local people, including a number of Palestinians in Sutton who have lost family members in Gaza. We're relieved that this Gaza ceasefire has finally entered its first phase, with both Israeli and Palestinian hostages being reunited with their families after being kidnapped and held without trial. But many are rightly worried about the ceasefire being broken. In the last few days, Israel has clearly broken ceasefire conditions in Lebanon, and Donald Trump has openly pushed for the total ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Israeli military and settler violence has escalated in the occupied West Bank, as Israel launched airstrikes and incursions into Jenin. Today was the soonest possible date for this to be discussed. And it's important we do this as soon as possible because it is a life-saving petition. Today is also Holocaust Memorial Day, a day that serves to remind us all of the consequences of dehumanization. The Palestine movement stands for peace and universal human rights. It consists of thousands of Jewish people in the UK, some of them Holocaust survivors, and together we defend the commitment to prevent genocide. Sutton Friends of Palestine stands against all forms of anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia because we know where it leads. Sutton Friends of Palestine stands in unwavering solidarity with all oppressed peoples, no matter their religion or the color of their skin. We learn the lessons of history and we say never again for anyone. Thank you.
Now, I mean, that's hardly a statement that includes any sort of anti-Semitism. Now, Tommy hasn't been offered a right of reply, so I caught up with him earlier and I first asked what happened at the meeting.
We presented our petition of 1,800 plus signatures that we've been doing for a few months. As lead petitioner, I was invited to give a 5-minute speech to the council. I outlined why we're doing it. You know, the ethical reasons, very obvious. We don't want to be complicit in a genocide. And because the debate happened to fall on Holocaust Memorial Day, I commemorated that in my speech, and I said, never again for anyone. The Tory councillor who spoke, he wasn't the same one who was contacted by the Time or contacted the Times, but the one who spoke decided to essentially say that it would not be passed through the pension committee, which means he thinks that we should stop it now at the council debate, apparently. So the Lib Dems and Labour voted it through. The Tories did not. There was quite a bit of booing, as you'd expect, but it passed, and we celebrated and left.
Now, when did you hear about the news that the Tory councillor wrote in the Times? And did anyone reach out to you for comment?
It was around midnight the day of the debate, and I was sort of scouting Twitter to see if anyone's posted anything. It turns out the Tory councillor who spoke in the debate had posted a link to the Times article, obviously very proud of it. And I read it. I was like, this is a load of rubbish. And right at the end of the article, it did say Sutton Friends of Palestine was contacted for comment, but it absolutely, I have the contacts with Sutton Friends of Palestine. Not an email, not a DM on any social media, nothing.
I mean, you're a 19-year-old young man. It's brave to stand up for something such as this. And here we have a Tory councillor colluding with the media to smear not just you as racist, but essentially the council. I mean, how does that make you feel?
I've come to expect it. I mean, after what we've seen in the last few years of Palestine activists, the smear campaign with Jeremy Corbyn, what you mentioned the other day on your show about the Green Party, I mean, it's just so expected now, and so this is going into this. I absolutely know if I do anything that's meaningful to support Palestine, something like this is going to come up, and well, that doesn't mean we're going to let it slide when it does.
I'm actually quite interested to know, has there been sort of any fallout from this? Has anyone reached out to you in support, and has anyone actually attacked you for this as well? Because at the end of the day, I mean, this is a Tory councillor, well-connected, writing in a big publication, and you are just a constituent. As I mentioned, you're a young man. There's clearly a huge power imbalance here. So what's the reception been like following this incident?
There's a lot of outrage from those in our borough who are sort of politically aware. There's a lot of complaints, as far as I know, going to the council about this conduct. There's anger from the the Lib Dems and the Labour councillors. The way this has been conducted is ridiculous. With constituents are trying to present a petition, and they get smeared in the national media. It's going to discourage people from presenting petitions in future. There's been nasty comments from people online who've seen the Twitter or the Times article and posted on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. Posted on Twitter, horrible things about Sutton Friends of Palestine, horrible things about me, and it's just like, well, this wave of hate has been invited by this Tory councillor who's got all of these contacts. And we also had UK Lawyers for Israel smearing us, comparing us to Nazis because of this petition calling for ethical divestment.
We've covered this on Turn Up so many times. It hurts communities. It hurts the Jewish community, actually, I think, when we do this. But I understand that you and the council have put in a complaint against the Conservative council. Can you talk me through about that? Just briefly go over this complaint towards the Tory councillor.
Yeah, it really does focus on the fact that, I mean, we've engaged with a democratic process. We put the petition forward in mid-November, and this article makes it out as though this petition, we chose the date of Holocaust Memorial Day for it to be discussed. We did not choose the date, so that's, quite frankly, that's defamatory to say that we did, or to even imply that we did. The complaint focuses on that, but also on the fact that before it had even been discussed at council, this article went live in the Times to essentially intimidate us and intimidate any constituent who might put forward a petition that the Tory opposition disagrees with. And it's just not how democracy should be done on a local level, especially.
Tom Drummond is the Tory councillor. If he was here right now, what would you say to him?
Ooh, I'd ask him whether he well, no, I know he did it on purpose, but I'd ask him why he felt it was necessary to claim that this local group that's made of local people who are, some of them have relatives who have died in Gaza, why he thought it was acceptable or even strategic to go to the national media and to call us out for doing something that we didn't do. And I'd ask why he thinks it's disrespectful to even the fact that this did fall on Holocaust Memorial Day. We commemorated that, and we said it's important that we remember past genocides and that we use the memory of past genocides to fight future and present genocides. But I'd have to ask him, why don't you see the importance of that?
Now, obviously, it's very expensive, but you say that he's made defamatory claims in the article. Have you considered potential legal action, or those supporting you? Is this an avenue you're willing to take?
Well, I haven't looked into it fully yet, but I suppose there's grounds for it, considering that the things that were published were harming my reputation, the reputation of the group, and were false. So yeah, we have had discussions about taking legal action, and we're still considering it. Groups like UK Lawyers for Israel, I know they've threatened legal action against councils, but they are apparently all talk and no bite. But as local people who actually have a case, I suppose we could do a bit of legal action.
Do you have any advice for anyone else if they find themselves in a similar situation? We know that for years, especially since the 7th of October, there has been a lot of weaponization of anti-Semitism. It's from people who are well connected against those who are not, and it's obviously an uphill battle. But is there any advice you give to these people? What should they do if they find themselves in a situation like yours?
Well, the first thing that needs to be said is that hopefully they would already be in a grassroots community. But if not, you need to build a grassroots community, get local connections, because the fact that we're able to connect with each other and we've all got different bits of advice and expertise, that's really supportive. And if anything comes someone's way like this, then you can really make sure that you utilize these connections that we have, with what few connections we have as local people to local politicians. But also, don't be scared. It's fine. It's something that's going to happen. We got to deal with it. If we want to, help people in Palestine, this is something we're going to come up against. But also, I think reach out to people who will report on stuff like this, like yourself. The Times isn't ever going to publish something like this, what you're doing. So reach out to independent media.
Now, has Councillor Drummond responded at all? Maybe not personally to you, but is he aware that there is a complaint against himself? Does he know anything about this?
Well, the complaints were sent out yesterday. Not sure how fast it's moved through, but he'll be made aware, if not already, then in the coming days.
Now, that was Tommy Oliver, the co-founder of Sutton for Palestine. What a bright young lad, a really confident young man. It must be quite nerve-wracking to do some speech in front of the council, so really, really good for him. But what I find really astonishing is that a well-connected Tory councillor can just smear a young man of being a racist, even saying Nazi. Samuel, I want to bring you in on this. I mean, what do you make of the fact that Councillor Drummond can just get in touch, or have someone get in touch with a national paper and make up lies and just go about their day?
Yeah, it's disgraceful, isn't it? It's and that young man spoke very well, by the way, in solidarity with the Palestinians. Well done to that young man. I wish I could say I find it surprising, but looking back at the history, obviously, of Jeremy Corbyn and the whole movement and how that movement was smeared as anti-Semitic, it doesn't really come as that much of a surprise. I think at this point we can expect to find, voices and mainstream voices in the media very hostile to people who speak out against the genocide and the ongoing ceasefire, which actually Israel is not actually respecting, by the way, at the moment. But I think that, unfortunately, this is very much expected. I watched for years, and you watched for years and years, as the mainstream media smeared us as anti-Semites, just for speak. And back then, obviously, this is pre-October the 7th. We were just calling out the atrocities and human rights abuses that Israel routinely carried out on Palestinians, and that was that deemed us anti-Semitic. Even things as such as the IHRA definition. I'm sure you remember when that whole conversation was going on about whether that was anti-Semitic or not. It's just a complete portrayal of the left, portrayal as left as anti-Semitic, when in actuality we're just trying to stand up for Palestinian rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like there's this sort of boy who cried wolf situation, which is that I don't think people are going to buy it anymore, especially since the 7th of October. I think people's consciousness have changed, and the sort of the anti-Semitism smears, I don't think are going to wash on people like they did to Jeremy Corbyn between 2015 and 2019. But the worry it's been for me the entire time when the left was basically being tarred as anti-Semitic is that it hurts Jewish people, because you're trivializing some real hurt, some true racism, and anti-Semitism is the oldest form of racism. You're trivializing that, and it's only going to hurt Jewish people.
That's completely correct. That was on the forefront of my mind during those years as well. That hang on a second, there are actually vile anti-Semites out there who, as we can see, who are back publicly doing Nazi salutes and actually being defended by the ADL. Which is interesting.
Exactly.
But this is exactly to the heart of the point we were talking about. Yes, when you routinely cry that this is anti-Semitic and that is anti-Semitic, when they're simply just advocating for Palestinians, then you get to a situation where now, you get real hardcore Nazis who are seemingly becoming more bold about telling us exactly who they are. And this moment is exactly very frightening because of those reasons. So I think, this constant portrayal of people who see Palestinians as humans to be anti-Semitic is deeply problematic. And as you mentioned, I think it's the dangerous moment at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a really good point about the ADL. They defended Elon Musk. And I thought these people were really concerned about anti-Semitism. And anti-Semitism still, 99.9% of it comes from the far right. And you've got Musk doing a Nazi salute, and suddenly they're apologizing for it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to quickly ask if you had seen, because there had been some polling and it showed about what the public perception on what the parties were in terms of their anti-Semitism. And, it's crazy to see that parties like Reform are viewed as being way less anti-Semitic than Labour. And the Green Party, it's like an upside down world, but
I mean, we covered this actually a couple of days ago. The Green Party, according to this specific poll from Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, they say
I might have watched it from your show actually. I might have watched it.
They say that the Green Party, what is it? They're the most tolerant of anti-Semitism. They're viewed that way, and 72% of apparently Jewish people who feel like this poll think the Green Party do so. And then you're right. You look at Reform. You could look at UKIP, and they're on the lower end of the scale. And I'm thinking, so more right-wing parties are seen as less anti-Semitic than left-wing parties.
Yes.
Something clearly doesn't add up, and we know this is more to do with Israel than it is to do with anti-Semitism. I thought it was really interesting as well that Councillor Drummond's one sort of line of attack against Tommy Oliver and the council was that it was on Holocaust Remembrance Day. Now, of course, the petitioners didn't decide that. That was automatically selected for them. But even if they did select it, you're going to be offended that you're calling out a genocide on a day when you're supposed to remember and say never again. Because I know people would say, okay, if you want to do your pro-Palestine thing, maybe do it on another day. But the entire premise of never again is to say no to genocide, ethnic cleansing, and Holocaust. And there seems to be no better day than Holocaust Remembrance Day to talk about Palestinians.
I think this point I'm about to make really segues into this perfectly. But are you familiar with a commentator called Vanessa Feltz?
Yes.
Vanessa Feltz.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, she started off as a celebrity, didn't she? And sort of moved into, I think she went on Talk Radio or LBC.
Honestly, I was in an Uber the other day, and I don't listen to LBC. I don't really listen to radio that much, but
Mm.
it was on. It was on, and Vanessa Feltz was on, and she was talking about. I think it was on Holocaust Remembrance Day, and she rightly started off talking about how dehumanization starts off,
Yeah.
and how we need to be, we need to be eagle-eyed and look out for it. And then she used the day and that moment to then now start shitting on Palestinian supporters. She used that opportunity to then say there are some who actually think what's going on in Palestine is a genocide. Well, actually, you need, and it's just this absolute refute. First of all, she's using this to downplay another genocide. How disgusting is that?
Mm.
And secondly, it's just this refusal to acknowledge the clearly genocidal statements made by Israeli government
Absolutely.
ministers. It's not a secret. They've been very open about it. When the war, quote unquote war, started, they made no qualms about shutting off food, electricity, water to people in Palestine and to Gazans, which is actually a war crime. So I think to hear her use the Holocaust Remembrance Day to then talk down and belittle people who stand up for Palestinians, I think it was absolutely disgusting, and it really triggered me, I have to say.
Understandable. But we're going to move on to our next
Yeah.
story. Right-wing priest Calvin Robinson has been dismissed after mimicking the Nazi salute at a pro-life rally.
God bless all of you for what you're doing. Please keep doing it. I hope that I can encourage you, and my heart goes out to you. God bless.
The guy is so weird. He's so weird. It's so pathetic. I mean, it was also half-assed. If you're going to do a fascist salute, do it with your chest. It's cowardly. Now, Robinson has now responded to the church. In response, the Anglican Catholic Church, to which the 39-year-old belonged, announced they had revoked his license and defrocked him. Robinson argued in a subsequent post on Thursday that his gesture was a joke, taken out of context by hysterical liberals. He said that his attempt at dry wit was not a joke at the expense of World War II, nor was it, he says, an admission of his support of Nazis. Whether a silly old cleric like me makes a poor joke is irrelevant, the 39-year-old said. Do not be swayed and distracted by the enemy whispering in your ears. Focus on the light. All human life is sacred. Imago Dei. Sorry, he's just so bizarre. Samuel, it was just a joke, so I guess that's fine then.
You know what? I'm sure you've read the response that the church gave in when they gave him the sack, and I actually liked one of the statements they put in that reply, which was that regardless of what, if it was a troll or whatever it was, that doing that salute alone downplays the seriousness of anti-Semitism, and for whatever point he thought he was making, maybe it was to troll the left or it was to, it doesn't matter, because actually we know where that salute comes from. We know the history. We know the baggage, and anyone using it that flippantly obviously doesn't care enough about human rights or the abuses that happened during the Holocaust. So I honestly think that it's a bit annoying, because there was a time where we used to say, oh, just ignore people like him, we're just giving him attention. But unfortunately, I think people like him are getting attention. I think that they know that these things are very controversial, which is why they're pushing and doing it even more. And I think there's also this, in some quarters, plausible deniability, right? They're still kind of, like you said, they're not doing it with their full chest. They're kind of doing half salutes, but we know where this is going. And I think it's just our duty to just call a spade a spade. They will try to. I saw Joe Rogan trying to gaslight his listeners, saying that, oh, it wasn't a salute. It was like, my heart goes out to you. Just all this stuff. I honestly think we just need to call them out on their bullshit, because this is just a joke.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think he did that salute in the way Musk did. I mean, Musk was full throat. That was a Nazi salute. Robinson was imitating him, but Robinson is on the political right. He supports a lot of what Musk believes. So that was
Yeah.
kind of trying to be funny and sort of standing in solidarity with Musk. So whether it was intentional or not, it was still the salute. He knew what people thought of it. He knew what it represents. So it being a joke is irrelevant. You cannot hide behind that excuse, can you?
Yeah, no, that's totally it. And like you said, there is no confusion as to where he lies politically.
Yeah.
I remember, maybe it was maybe 5-6 months ago. I remember being on X. God, those times I don't want to think back to. Now I'm on Blue Sky, which is much better. But on X, I think he did a tweet something to the effect of, basically just showing no empathy for immigrants. I think it was like a tweet something like "kick them out" or use physical force or something to that degree. And I remember in the replies, even right wingers, if you would believe it, were kind of being like, well, you're a reverend or Christian or whatever. Like, shouldn't we be a bit more empathetic? He's clearly on the right. So when he does these salutes or whatever it is, there's no plausible deniability. It's the same with Elon Musk. It's like, oh, did he do the salute? Well, I don't know. Is he supporting the ADF or AFD or as what they call the AFD in Germany? I think that's pretty much evidence enough to say that this person is, on the right and a fascist. I'm sorry. This is what they are.
I think we'll leave it there because we don't need to spend too much time on attention seekers like Calvin Robinson. But before we move on to our next story, I just want to thank everyone who's tuned in so far. We've got over 100 people watching concurrently. That's really good. Your comments have been great. Actually, one of the comments has made me laugh. I can't remember who said it, but they called Calvin Robinson Sideshow God because he used to have his big hair. That is funny. Fair play to you. I do just want to say, though, that all of the stuff we do at Turn Left is completely voluntary. There's only a handful of us who are working overtime to bring you the news coverage that the corporate media doesn't want to do. So there are so many things you can do to help us. You can like the stream. If you haven't already, make sure you do that because the algorithm does like it. Drop a comment. We're going to read your comments even after the show is done. We try and read all of yours, actually. Share this with people. Share it with your friends and family or people you hate. I don't care. Share it with anyone. But we are, as I said, a voluntary organisation. There isn't really any money behind us. So if you can, that's only if you can support us financially by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/supports. There are 2 links there. One link is to our Patreon, where you can become a monthly supporter. But there's also another link where you can give a one-off donation, and that is it. We want to try and build a fully fledged media organisation. We can upgrade our equipment. We can do more interviews. We can travel more. We can go live more frequently. I know at the beginning of the year, we stepped down from 4 live shows to 3. We're looking at stepping it up again. But I want to be doing this every single day. So please support us any way you can, even if it's just a like or a share. Now, we are going to go to some of your comments. If we can bring up the first one, let's have a look and see what we got. Zeke the Beast. It's kind of weird how Netanyahu works with Trump's base, but Trump's base act like they care about Israel, but have people who do the Hitler salute. Well, that's the thing. I've always said there's a huge contradiction, or seemingly a contradiction, between Zionists, pro-Israel people, and a lot of these people being pretty anti-Semitic. I've always argued that I think Zionism is kind of anti-Semitic. I mean, you had Elon Musk who has bolstered literal Nazis. I mean, I think he's a Nazi himself, but even before he exposed as a fully fledged Nazi, he was bolstering them on Twitter. He was agreeing with like the oldest anti-Semitic tropes, and yet he's being received by Netanyahu and Israel because clearly to these people, you can be the wrong kind of Jew. If you're an anti-Zionist Jewish person, care about Palestinians, you're not really Jewish. That's incredibly anti-Semitic. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Samuel.
Yeah, no, totally. And it like, again, to this upside down world that we were talking about earlier, where Netanyahu was basically giving cover for Elon Musk's Nazi salute. You're right. There are many aspects of Zionism which is anti-Semitic, and as we said earlier, it does put the Jewish community at risk, and it downplays. I think there is a contradiction there, but insofar as that it's a imperialistic sort of dehumanizing ideology. I think that's where the connection is, and I think those contradictions will still play out. We're still watching what happens because obviously, some of the MAGA base are very they're standing on business when it comes to their anti-Semitism, but I think we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, let's go to our next comment. Flow Snake, Tommy Oliver. That feels better than a certain
Much
other
better.
chance. It does. It has a better ring to it. I do understand. I don't know if you're still there now, but I think Tommy Oliver was in the live show. If you're still watching,
Oh, awesome! Hey,
I believe so. But if you're still watching, hey Tommy, and again, I appreciate you giving me your time, and absolutely fully support what you did in Sutton Council.
yeah, full power to that guy.
Yo, I love how Turn Left got an interview with him. It's awesome grassroots interviews. Yeah, it's not something we typically do, but we need to do that far more often. Like, it's good to chase the big interviews, and of course, we will continue to do that. But I think we shouldn't forget that really to take on the corporate media and the right-wing media, it's not just about sort of becoming the next big thing, although, of course, would love to have 1 million subscribers, but it's about building up the grassroots. So we need to remember to speak to those on the ground as well as speaking to the sort of big famous intellectuals. And that's not a dig at anyone, by the way. That is just, it's just the way it goes. Yeah. Edward Sexby, Tommy mate, I'm a Jewish socialist. I'll start them again. Tommy mate, I'm a Jewish socialist who has been campaigning and talking about the situation in Palestine for 35 years and get called anti-Semitic all the time. Don't sweat it. Free Palestine solidarity. Exactly, just as a way of saying that Jewish people are smeared as anti-Semites because they don't agree with Zionists, which is truly vile. Truly.
Yeah.
Flow Snake. There's also the fact that by conflating being anti-genocide with being anti-Semitic, they imply that Jewish people are pro-genocide, which is clearly not only untrue, but also extremely dangerous. It goes back to the IHRA, one of the definitions, and it literally said, and there's problems with the IHRA, I can't speak today, IHRA, but one of the definitions was you shouldn't conflate Jewish people with Israel, and that was one of the big contentions when Jeremy Corbyn was leader, and they sort of just ushered through the definitions anyway to sort of stop a fuss. I mean, that didn't really end anything, did it? But it's a really important distinction. Zionism is a political ideology. Israel is a country, and it's not a protected characteristic. Jewish people are a community, and it's so funny how Zionists practice essentially anti-Semitism every single day because they say you must be pro-Israel if you're Jewish. And remember, there's many Christian Zionists. They're not Jewish themselves.
Yeah.
So another one.
100%.
Michael Anson, never again unless it lines the pockets of those in power. Well, of course. I mean, you can pretty much mark almost every conflict to someone benefiting from it. I mean, when it comes to Israel, of course, there is a religious extremist aspect to it, of course. But really, deep down, it comes to colonialism. Why was Israel created? Well, Britain helped create them because of our colonial interests.
That's right.
So I couldn't agree more, Michael. Graham Sudworth, did anyone else see some media outlets referring to it as an Elon Musk salute instead of a Nazi salute? That was crazy. Yeah, it's I mean, that is implicitly downplaying it, isn't it? I mean, I would love it if they call it the Elon Musk Nazi salute. I'm happy to tie Musk's name to the word Nazi, but the dropping of the Nazi salute, either calling it the Roman salute or the Elon Musk salute, it's downplaying it, isn't it, Samuel?
Yeah, I think we all saw what we saw, and again, this constant gaslighting is, if we could, I don't know language, but it's just bullshit. You know, I think we should be able to say what we see with our own. You know, it's like, don't believe your lying eyes. Actually, no, I saw a Nazi salute, and I see him supporting the AFD, and I see him supporting reform. I was thinking about this just the other day. He's supporting them in every single country. He's supporting the most right-wing party. Yeah. Like, what else do you have to do and provide as evidence to see that this guy is a Nazi?
Very true. I think that's all for our comments. It looks like it. We are going to move on to our next story. Donald Trump has made the bizarre and baseless claim that the American Airlines flights that crashed is because of DEI. Donald Trump used the plane crash in Washington, D.C. to attack his political enemies, claiming Democrats were responsible for declining standards in air traffic control, and that the disaster could have been caused by diversity, equity, and inclusion policies at the Federal Aviation Administration. Trump turned what might have been a somber press conference into a baseless rant against DEI, despite no evidence. The president was backed by the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, who said, "We can only accept the best and the brightest in positions affecting passenger safety," and the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, who said, "The era of DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest." Vice President J.D. Vance weighed in, and he said, then came the Vice President J.D. Vance, who claimed, "We want to hire the best people, actually competent enough to do the job," and said without offering evidence that hundreds had sued the US government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the colour of their skin. Now, if you don't know what DEI is, it's the new outrage trend from the American right. Diversity, equity, and inclusion seek to rebalance the workplace where minorities were typically overlooked in employment. But it's essentially become a dog whistle against black people. The funny thing is, black people aren't actually the main benefactors from DEI, it's actually women. However, that hasn't stopped the right from using it as a racist dog whistle, which is now being deployed by Reform MPs. Samuel, what do you make of Trump blaming a plane crash on DEI?
Well, it's I mean, it's despicable. It's despicable. It's really despicable. Thinking about, I'm not sure the exact number. I think it's 64, 65 lives that were tragically lost in that crash. And to use the press conference, which is what he did, he used that press conference to say, let's have a minute's silence, and then spout off baseless conspiracy theories about whether or not the pilot was a man or woman or was black. It's just a classic divide and conquer. And every time I look at his rhetoric, I'm astounded by how divisive it is. It's purposefully divisive. There is no element of trying to bring anyone together or trying to heal the nation. It's always about how can I sow the most division in this situation into the American public. And unfortunately, I think it's a strategy that he's been employing for the last 10 years. It seems to have worked on an unfortunately significantly large portion of the American electorate. But I think there will be a backlash. Ultimately, I think it is quite stark, isn't it? That we have the first major air incident since 9/11, which it was certainly the worst, and it's under Trump's watch. And I think that these things are going to repeat itself. This is just the beginning, I think, of the incompetence that we're going to see. And another thing to just mention is that it's been clear for a while now. Trump is seriously destabilizing the federal employees and air traffic controllers who are working to make sure everything runs smoothly. I think he fired around 3,000 federal employees related to the aviation industry, and I heard that he also got rid of the head of the FAA. Which was at Elon Musk's request, because Elon Musk had he wanted to continue putting out his space debris, and he doesn't want any government telling him that he can't do that. So Trump actually sacked the head of the FAA. At the time of the crash, there was no head of the FAA. So it just goes to tell you, actually, Trump himself is the DEI hire, somebody who has no qualifications on speaking about this and is casting all sorts of wild accusations, because let's be real, that's all his base has got. What solutions have they got to deliver to the American people? Nothing, apart from DEI is your enemy, hate your neighbor, and worship me. That's it.
I mean, when you were mentioning about Musk and Trump going in and firing a bunch of people, it actually reminded me of Grace Blakely's book, her latest book, Vulture Capitalism. And at the beginning of the book, she talks about Boeing. And we know there's a lot of issue with Boeing. And essentially there were some plane crashes with them. But the reason why was because the company was trying to cut back. Essentially, they wanted to cut 40% of the investment because obviously they want to make more profits. And what happens? The safety regulations go and a disaster happens. Now, I'm not saying that's directly happened this time,
Sure.
but it kind of tells me maybe there's a reason Trump is using DEI,
Yeah.
not because he's an asshole, because we all know he's an asshole,
Yeah.
but maybe it's to deflect from the questions that might
Sure.
be deregulation, corporate profits, not
Yeah.
strong enough. Well, unions actually, because unions aren't just about working conditions and pay; it's also about safety and regulations. And
Yeah.
instead of asking questions like that, Trump is sort of throwing out this curveball, and now the entire discussion, and we're falling for it, is about DEI and a dog whistle. Do you think there's potentially a distraction from an economic policy which is essentially allowing corporations to spend as little as possible and putting people's lives at risk?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think that it is deflection, certainly. It's funny now he has actually appointed an FAA director. It would have been nice at the time of the crash for there actually to have been one. But yeah, you're right. His base know that. I mean, and another thing as well, which I've been kind of cottoning on to, is that I don't know how much his base can plead ignorance. I'm getting to the stage where I'm thinking, oh, we need to be, countering the narrative. I think a lot of his base know, quite frankly, that what he's up to. But the idea is that blacks, women, gays are the enemy, and regardless of what the facts are, we are going to say it's DEI. So I think, we could ignore it, but I think it's at this moment it just is best to continue to push back against their DEI nonsense, because they're going to just continue to do it. That's their new thing. It's like the critical race theory. Remember CRT? That was their thing for a while. Carl Kowinski of Secular Talk. I'm sure you know of him. He has this meme where he says, there's this meme he always shares where the conservative mind chip has been taken out.
I know which one you're talking about. Yeah,
a particular issue this week, and then they replace it with something else, and it's like, I'm outraged about this. I think, look, yeah, you're absolutely right. He is deflecting, but like I said, I feel as though there is a growing backlash. That's the problem with incompetent regimes, right? They're so incompetent that eventually they're gonna run out of people to blame. It'll be too apparent.
Well, I mean, by the way, I want to say Carl Kalinske is excellent, and
he's great. I love
one of the OGs. In fact, he was actually the one that inspired me to go onto YouTube.
Oh, amazing!
I was watching his content. I loved his style, and I thought, let's get an English guy involved. And
yeah.
But you brought up a really good point, which is essentially it was woke, then it was CRT, now it's DEI. What's next year going to hold?
I shudder to think.
I mean, look, the brightest minds could not think of something so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Fiction couldn't write this, or
Yeah.
you couldn't write this. But on DEI, obviously we've seen the term used by the likes of Rupert Lowe, MP for Reform.
Yes.
And these people are desperate to import the American culture wars. I mean, do you think this is going to gain traction, or do you think the people in Britain will see right through the bullshit? Does that worry you?
That's a very good question. It's certainly a very interesting question. I think that a lot of American politics is very hard to sort of extrapolate and dump in the UK, because we're sort of we have our own thing going on as well. I think that I'm not sure. I don't know. Actually, I think it's an interesting question. I'm not sure to the extent of how well it will play with. I think in this country, to be fair to the right, I think they have their own thing already going on with the whole small boats. I think the immigrant thing is sort of a sticking issue in of itself. So adding DEI, perhaps some people on the right, fall for it. But I think by and large on the right, they have their own issue in the UK at least, which is the small boats. Its immigrants are too high in this country, and it's affecting our public services, which is all false, of course. But I think they have their own issue. So I don't know. It would be. I think it's one to look out for in terms of what happens with DEI. Keeping it clear. I actually before this podcast, I actually saw a GB News video from Nigel Farage. I think it's one of the latest uploads talking about something about DEI. So it's hard to say because all the comments were in agreement, but that's GB News comment section, so I wouldn't necessarily. But yeah, it's interesting to see how much of an issue it is.
I mean, I think I agree with you. I think you are right that the right have their own thing here. It is stop the boats, and it's grooming gangs, and it's many other
Yes.
things. If you look at America, they have a slightly different context. I think DEI works because they've had affirmative action. So everyone understands what that is. It's happened for a long time. So I think when you say, well, people are being hired because they're black or they're women, not because they're the brightest, I think that hits the context of the Americans. They understand that because of affirmative action. Over here, it's a bit like DEI, what? And the main driving force is, you're right, it stopped the boats and grooming gangs. But having said that, it's not stopped Farage reform from trying to import these culture wars. And if you asked me 5 years ago, I would say, no, the British people would not fall for this bullshit. I mean, doesn't mean they can't be propagandized. Of course they can, but like they won't be so brainwashed by the American culture wars. But then you've seen how the anti-trans hysteria has really ripped this country apart. 5 years ago, largely people didn't care, including the media. It was kind of like, just live your life, that's it. And we imported the anti-trans culture over here. So I don't know. I don't want to say I don't think the British people are going to fall for it, but I think the point what you made about the British right having their own sort of political sort of campaigns, which is grooming gangs and stop the boats, I think it's a really, really good point.
Yeah, they certainly have their own thing going on here that they rally around on the right in the UK, definitely.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to our final story of the night, and it is sticking with Donald Trump. On Wednesday, Donald Trump directed his administration to prepare Guantanamo Bay's Navy base to accommodate tens of thousands of criminal aliens, as he referred to them, marking the latest expansion of his immigration crackdown and concerning trajectory for human rights. The details of the plan remain unclear, but Trump instructed the Department of Defense and Homeland Security to ready the site for detainees.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo. This will double our capacity immediately, right? And that's a tough place to get out of. Today's signings bring us one step closer to eradicating the scourge of migrant crime in our communities once and for all. And it was just it's just an unforced error that we even have to be doing this. Now we need Congress to provide full funding for the complete and total restoration of our sovereign borders, as well as financial support to remove record numbers of illegal aliens.
Now, currently around 40,000 immigrants are being held in private detention centres and local jails nationwide, but funding limitations have constrained expansion. Vincent Warren, executive director of the Centre for Constitutional Rights, warned that Trump's order signals a dangerous shift, portraying migrants and asylum seekers as the new terrorist threat, discarded in an island prison, cut off from legal and social services. Trump's directive calls for expanding the Migrant Operations Center, which currently occupies a small former barracks capable of holding up to 120 migrants. That facility, largely empty in recent years, sits near fields that could be converted into a large-scale tent city. Currently, that facility holds just 15 prisoners and is operated by 800 troops and civilian staff. If implemented, the proposed detention site could be enclosed with barbed wire, similar to the camps of the 1990s, which housed both families and single adults. Guantanamo Bay has long been notorious for its use as a detention site, particularly in the aftermath of the 11th of September attacks. The US government has been accused of employing torture techniques, including waterboarding, stress positions, and sleep deprivation against terrorism suspects held at the facility. Reports from human rights organizations detail how detainees were subject to cruel and inhumane treatment, often without formal charges or trials. The prison's history has drawn international condemnation, with many viewing it as a symbol of human rights violations carried out under the guise of national security. Trump's administration has escalated its immigration enforcement in recent weeks with widespread arrests nationwide, while Trump has pledged a historic mass deportation campaign such as an initiative would require dramatic expansion of detention facilities and additional resources. Guantanamo is a black hole designed to evade scrutiny with a troubling history of inhumane conditions, said Lucas Guttentag, a former Justice Department official in the Biden administration. This is a transparent attempt to bypass legal oversight, and it will not succeed. Samuel, I mean, before we comment on Trump, Guttentag says that Guantanamo Bay is inhumane, it's to avoid scrutiny. Yet my first thought that comes to mind is that the Democrats didn't close it. I mean, Obama promised to close Guantanamo Bay, yet here we are 13 years later, neither Obama or Biden did anything about it. So surely this is on them first of all.
Yeah, I think this is a collective failure of both parties. I have a ton of criticisms for the Democratic Party. I think, as you know, I'm somebody who criticizes them regularly, and I think this is part of one of the very, very legitimate reasons that you can criticize the Democratic Party. If you stand on being truly anti-fascist, if you stand truly on being in support of human rights, this is something that, you're right, Obama should have dealt with. Back then, it was, I believe it was one of the cases a bit before my time, but I believe it was one of his campaign promises back in 2008 to close Guantanamo Bay, and he didn't. So I think there's definitely a lot of blame that can be held at the Democratic Party, and even things such as about the way that during the election campaign, Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party threw immigrants under the bus as well. I've just been thinking about that a lot. It ties into the fact that Democrats can't be trusted necessarily to fight for those principles. But yeah, back to Trump. I think that this is again red meat for his base. I think that this isn't necessarily something that's surprising because he's been telling people about this on Truth Social for ages and stuff. He's been very open about the fact that he doesn't give a damn about human rights, and he will take people to any black site that he wants. So I think that this is a moment where, the left needs to be very vigilant. It needs to hold Trump to account on this, because he and his base will continue to push the boundaries further and further. Yeah,
and Trump said he wants to sign an executive order to put 30,000 immigrants in Guantanamo Bay. But there are currently 780 prisoners. There's just no way this is possible. So the lack of humanity aside, this is just incompetency. And surely he'll be forced to change policy once they realise this can't be done. Do you agree, or do you think no, he's gonna push through?
I mean, when you have an old man that surrounds himself with complete yes men, I mean, at this point, your guess is as good as mine when I think about it. I think about this all the time. I wonder, where does the limit to reality meet his desire to just push through, people? I think that, and another thing that some people have been mentioning not recently, is that Trump, I think, will try to go for the optics. It might be clear, like you say, that, okay, maybe X cannot be done right now. But what he will do is, he will still abuse power. It might not be 30,000. It might, even if it's 1,000, even if it's 500, it's still a black site. It's still an abuse of human rights. So I think this is a moment where the left just needs to, whatever he's angling at, we need to be there to oppose.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I think Trump is 100% serious about his undocumented migrant policy. I just think in terms of specifically Gitmo, the guy's an idiot, but it is red meat. But no matter how the right wing spin this, though, his plan for thousands of undocumented immigrants is concentration camps. I don't care what his defenders say. That is what it is. So what are your thoughts about that? I mean, this is a real dark territory, which I also think in the coming years, it's unfortunately going to become the new norm.
Normalized, yeah. Well, this is it, and I it's such a tough time, as a leftist, because we're kind of dealing with the fact that, in 2016, I think there was a bit more of a sense of urgency where, Trump had lost the popular vote. He had become president. He had lost the popular vote. And I think that this is the key thing, Curtis. I think, like I mentioned earlier, the Democrats really fucked up by ceding the ground, and I think we've discussed this before, ceding the ground to the right wing on this issue of immigration. You mentioned about it being normalized. This didn't happen in a vacuum. Actually, if I think Sam Seder was saying this the other day, that imagine if we had Joe Biden, who was actually competent in terms of speaking and could actually hold press conferences, and he had, I don't know, 50, 100 immigrants behind him, say, these are the immigrants that make America. This is the real America. Do not come for these people. Let's go after the billionaires who are, storing their billions in tax havens across the world, across the globe. I think that is the key failure here, to defend and protect immigrants all this time. And now that it's just been snowballing with Trump and his horrible rhetoric, with no one on the Democratic side being able to push back against it, to actually know immigrants have a fantastic record in this country. They have a crime rate that is lower than the native borns in the US. So why are we demonizing and making all these lies? But unfortunately, you didn't see that. So I guess we have to start seeing it. We have to start changing the way that, and I can see that even some Democrats now are kind of giving up and essentially, saying we need to be more right wing. I think actually you need to go the complete opposite way and stand up for the rights of immigrants, because it is, like you said, going to become very normalized to become very nasty and demonize immigrants.
I also just want to mention, Natalie said in the chat, and I think it's worth saying that, they're not all undocumented migrants. Some of them do have US citizenship, and they do have birthright citizenship, and Donald Trump wants to take away birthright citizenship. I also think it's a good point. I mean, I've watched Sam Seder and the Majority Report. I didn't see that segment, but that's a good point. If Biden was competent, he was a good communicator, because obviously in his last, he is a good communicator in his younger years, but obviously not now. Standing in front of immigrants saying, this is our country, we built this. I actually do think they'll be powerful, and it'll be more powerful because we're always told that so-called progressive parties have to capitulate on things like immigration. Well, how did that work out for the Democrats? I mean, they've lost, and the reason why they lost is because they couldn't energize their own base.
Yes.
We can also probably thank Jonathan Ashworth for that, because he was one of the few people that was sent over to help the Democrats. Please. And one of the things he said, it was literally, we need to be strict on immigration.
Yes.
So thanks, Jonathan Ashworth. You've given us Trump.
Yeah. I honestly, genuinely cannot describe in words how that makes me feel. Every time I hear that story about the involvement of the Labour right going to Washington, it wasn't enough to destroy Jeremy Corbyn and the genuine left wing movement in the UK. They had to go into the United States and deliver fascism. Anyway.
Well, Jonathan Ashworth, who's now the head of Labour Together, which is the shadow. We say it's shadowy, we know about it, but the right wing sort of faction and group that gave us Keir Starmer, essentially. Yes. Apparently he's doing a terrible job. Yeah. Apparently he's doing a terrible job at that, but they're eyeing up Ashworth as a safe seat. So he'll probably be back in Parliament, because we could not get rid of him. The media kept platforming him even though he lost. He's gone to America. He helps the Democrats lose. He's screwing up Labour Together, although it's not all bad because they suck. But he might be back in Parliament. So the hell never ends with Mr. Ashworth.
Just a quick random funny story. But when I had Facebook back in the day, I never used to troll anyone, actually. But for some reason, I think it was after the 2019 election loss, I just went to Jonathan Ashworth's page every single day, and I just used to troll him in the comments. Nothing extreme. I'd just be like, "You're a traitor," and he would reply to all the comments as well. But anyway,
screw him though. Screw him. Yeah. Anyway, I think that is all we have time for. I do want to thank you, Samuel, for joining me. You were excellent tonight. I also want to thank our wonderful viewers who tuned in. Remember to like this stream, and if you're not a subscriber, hit that button, and also make sure you hit the notification bell, because I'm getting complaints from people. They're saying I'm subscribed, but I don't get any notifications when you go live or a new video drops. So do that. It is a must. Now, we are trying to reach 20,000 subscribers, and we're nearly on 18,000, so it's not far to go. Help us hit that milestone. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to support our Patreon, where you can support us monthly, or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. We are back tomorrow with the Debrief podcast, a more chilled and fun look at the news, which is definitely needed. Thank you so much again. I'm Curtis Daly, and I'll see you next time.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.